Good morning. I'm on my way to the wine country with a group of folks to see the bottle opening of an African American winery. But I did want to take the opportunity to join you in your conference today. Tony McCrae has put together an excellent program. We're very excited to work with him at Zenviba. And I want to share with you what we've been doing in California with the African American Freedom Trail. 25 years ago, I wrote a book called The Roots Run Deep, The Black Experience in California. It was because I learned that the origin of the word California came from the saga of an African queen that motivated me to write a 400-page book. And since then, we've done 30 exhibitions and expanded to 4 volumes on the entire history of the state. What we've done in the last 5 years, in conjunction with the National Park Service and the State Department of Parks and Recreation, is to create a heritage card under Section 5 of the Resources Code in California. What the Heritage Corridor is allowing us to do is to actually raise money to support the preservation and development of African American heritage in California. What we share with Florida is the fact that African American history here is multilingual history. 40% of the pobladores who settled California when it was part of Mexico were of African descent. 26 of the 44 pobladores that founded Los Angeles were black. The majority of the settlers of San Diego were black. Same thing's true in Florida. I'm sure you're aware of the history of the black settlements in St. Augustine. And importantly, that settlement of African Americans in St. Augustine was 50 years before what's supposed to be the beginning of black history in 1619 in Jamestown. So there's a lot of redefinition and rediscovery of African American history. And Florida is one of the places where it starts. One of the people that we share in common is a man named Juan Garrido, who in Florida was the first person to actually plant grain in the Western Hemisphere. Juan Garrido also continued with Cortez to Mexico City and was second in charge of his expedition. He was called the Black Conquistador. He went with Cortez to Baja California and helped name it based on the saga of Queen Calafia and her island nation of California, which was populated only by black women in 1535. So we share a common origin story between Juan Garrido, Florida, and California. Ironically, in neither state do people know about him. He also was involved in the settlement of Puerto Rico as well. So the opportunity that presents itself is that this is fascinating history. It's qualitatively different history. It is a history that inspires and motivates people to learn more. And so, as a business venture, that means that Northwest Florida has the opportunity to capitalize on things like the BP settlement to take that history and to make it a draw. Pensacola is a perfect place to get people into an expanded view of African American history. I plan to work closely with Tony McCrae to develop a African American regional tourism strategy that starts with Northwest Florida and extends along the Gulf Coast. Yesterday, Representative Jim Clyburn got passage of a 5-year extension of the Gullah Geechee National Heritage Corridor that stretches from North Carolina to Florida. One of our recommendations is today to create a similar National Heritage Corridor called the Gulf Maroon National Heritage Corridor. One of the things that we have lost in our history is that Florida and most of our Gulf states didn't become part of the United States until the 19th century. So for 4 centuries before that, those areas were under either Spanish or French or sometimes British rule. And this area was really where escaped Africans went to. I mean, we have the picture of the Underground Railroad and people going to Canada. But just as a practical matter, if you're in Georgia or South Carolina or Virginia, a lot simpler to go to Florida. And so we know about Fort Mose and the Negro Fort there, the Black Seminoles. We know about John Horse. There were at least 50 communities of maroon settlements in Northwest Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. And so that history of an area where blacks were able to live in relative freedom for centuries is part of the history that has not been told. And we think that telling that story is going to be a significant lure for tourism. It's going to be a lure for investment. There are opportunities to develop coastline areas, marinas, resorts, and all kinds of projects. So what it's going to take is not only capital, but it's also going to take a vision based around knowledge of the history. In my book, Road to Ratification, how 27 states tackled the most pressing issue in American history, we look at the origin of the black population in every state. And particularly for Florida, it is a fascinating story that we believe people will be extremely excited by. And with people like Gene Franklin here, who's been beating a drum about this for many years, I think that Pensacola can really take leadership in turning the Gulf into a mecca for African Americans, because our history there is longer than really anyone except the native peoples, and it's actually very intertwined with them. So I look forward to working with you, Tony, and feel free to contact me, John, at Zenviba.org, or go to reunionnetwork.info to see our educational programming. And so if you have questions, you can forward them to Tony, and I'll be happy to get back with you. Thanks a lot.